Sir, you need to step away from the dock immediately. The cop's hand was already moving toward his belt when I started laughing. Not the nervous kind of laugh, the kind that comes when you realize the universe just handed you the ultimate punchline. See, 30 seconds earlier, Delilah Whitmore had been screaming across the water about how I was trespassing on Lake Reserve property and didn't belong in their community. Her voice carried that perfect pitch of entitled fury that could shatter wine glasses. Now she's watching from her $1 million deck, arms crossed, waiting for me to get arrested like some common criminal. What she doesn't know, what none of them know, is that I just inherited the deed that controls every drop of water flowing to their entire lakefront development. Because sometimes when life hands you an HOA president who thinks she owns the lake, well, sometimes you find out you actually own all their water access. What would you do in my shoes? And hey, where are you watching from? Drop your location below, especially if you've got HOA war stories. 3 months ago, I was Rex Thornton, 52-year-old retired electrician living in Denver, staring at life insurance paperwork and wondering what the hell to do next. My wife Clara had lost her fight with cancer the year before, and every corner of our house still carried the ghost of her lavender perfume mixed with hospital antiseptic, a combination that could drop me to my knees faster than touching a live wire. The estate auction notice arrived on a Tuesday. Uncle Jasper, my dad's hermit brother who'd lived on some Montana lake for 40 years, had finally kicked the bucket. We weren't close, but the old coot always remembered my birthday with a card containing a crisp 20. His estate was going to public auction. Lake Reserve parcel with associated territorial water rights, minimum bid $150K. I'd never heard of a lake reserve being privately owned, but Clara always said I should take more risks. With $180K from her life insurance burning a hole in my savings account, I figured, why not make a strategic investment? Mountain property, lakefront access, and whatever those water rights meant sounded like a solid retirement plan. The drive to Pine Lake, Montana beat the hell out of Denver's smog-choked air. That sharp mountain breeze actually filled your lungs instead of coating them with exhaust fumes and urban despair. The auction was held right on the property, and I'll admit, the place took my breath away. A modest 1960s cabin sat on 3 pristine acres, complete with a weathered cedar dock stretching into water so clear you could count stones 15 feet down. Uncle Jasper had hand-built that dock from selected logs, every joint fitted like fine furniture. Here's the thing nobody mentioned during the auction. Pine Lake Estates surrounded my purchase like a necklace of $1 million homes. 47 luxury houses, each marketed with exclusive lake access as their golden selling point. The real estate brochures probably used pristine and private more than a politician uses transparency. I bought the property for exactly $150K, figuring I'd gotten lakefront real estate for the price of a Denver condo. What I didn't realize was that Lake Reserve parcel meant I'd just purchased the heart of their entire development, and those mysterious territorial water rights buried in legal jargon, that was about to become the most expensive oversight in HOA history. Enter Delilah Whitmore. She materialized on my property during week 2 like some suburban conquistador, clipboard in one hand, measuring tape in the other. Designer workout clothes that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent, perfectly styled blonde hair, and a smile that could flip from sweet to surgical faster than a breaker trips. "Welcome to Pine Lake Estates," she announced without bothering to knock. "I'm Delilah, HOA president. We need to discuss some compliance issues with your recent purchase." I was replacing rotted dock planks when she arrived, breathing in that honest scent of fresh cedar, while her overpowering perfume competed with the mountain air. She rattled off violations like a court clerk. Dock setback requirements, architectural guidelines, community aesthetic standards. The previous owner was difficult about modernizing, she said with fake sympathy that could curdle milk. But I'm sure you'll be more reasonable about bringing things up to community standards. I wiped sawdust off my hands, the kind of honest dirt that comes from actual work, and looked at her clipboard. Every violation targeted my dock, the dock Uncle Jasper built, the dock that came with my legal purchase, the dock I was improving with my own sweat and money. "Lady, I bought this at a public auction with clear title. Maybe let me figure out what I actually own before you start telling me what's wrong with it." Her smile went arctic. "Mr. Thornton, Pine Lake Estates is a premier community. Property values here average $1.2 million. We have standards, not rules, not guidelines. Standards, like I was contamination requiring management. That was my first hint that Delilah Whitmore had just picked a fight with the wrong electrician. 3 days later, Delilah returned with reinforcements. This time she brought what she called a state environmental inspector, a guy named Dale who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else on Earth. He carried an official-looking clipboard and wore a polo shirt with some kind of state seal that seemed suspiciously crooked, like it had been ironed on by someone who'd never seen the real thing. "Mr. Thornton," Delilah announced with theatrical authority, "Dale here needs to examine your Lake Reserve property for environmental compliance violations. We've had reports of potential ecological damage from your modifications." Dale started poking around my shoreline like he knew what he was doing, taking photos of perfectly normal dock supports and making notes that probably said things like "wood touches water" and "fish swim here." The whole performance felt rehearsed, like bad community theater where everyone forgot their lines. But something was eating at me about this whole dog and pony show. Dale kept asking questions that had nothing to do with environmental impact. "How deep you think this water gets? You planning any major construction projects? Ever notice unusual wildlife patterns around here?" That last question was delivered while he stared intently at a perfectly ordinary mallard duck paddling by, as if it might be harboring state secrets. The smell of fresh bullshit was stronger than the pine needles decomposing along my waterline. Then I spotted something that made my electrician's instincts start buzzing. Parked right there in my gravel driveway was a Ford F-150 with "Dale's Fine Furniture, We Deliver Dreams," painted on the side in curly script that belonged on a bakery, not a government vehicle. Clara always said I had a nose for spotting fakes. Came from 30 years of identifying bootleg electrical components that could burn your house down. I pulled out my phone and dialed the Montana Department of Environmental Quality, while Dale was still measuring my dock with a tape measure that looked suspiciously like it came from the hardware store clearance bin. "Hi, this is Rex Thornton on Pine Lake. I've got an environmental inspector here named Dale, and I just wanted to confirm his visit was scheduled." The voice on the other end was friendly, but confused. "I'm sorry, Mr. Thornton, but we don't have any inspections scheduled for Pine Lake this month, and we don't have an inspector named Dale. Could you describe this person?" I put the phone on speaker and repeated the question loud enough for Dale to hear every word. His face went whiter than fresh drywall, and I swear I could smell his panic sweat mixing with the clean mountain air. "Dale," I called out sweetly, "the real state office says they've never heard of you. Want to explain that to everyone?" Dale dropped his clipboard like it was on fire and literally ran. Not walked quickly, not made excuses. Full-on sprinted to his furniture truck and peeled out of my driveway like he was being chased by angry wasps, leaving behind a cloud of dust and gravel. In his panic, he dropped his fake state ID badge, which turned out to be a laminated printout that wouldn't fool a nearsighted mall cop. But Delilah? She doubled down harder than a Vegas gambler on a losing streak. "Well," she huffed, adjusting her designer workout jacket with the kind of righteous indignation that only comes from years of getting away with nonsense. "That just proves my point. You're clearly intimidating official personnel with your aggressive behavior. Private community standards supersede state regulations anyway. The woman had balls, I'll give her that. Caught red-handed running a fake inspection scam, and she's trying to flip it like I'm the problem. Lady, your brother-in-law just fled the scene after impersonating a government official. That's a federal crime, not a community standard." Her eyes flashed with something dangerous, and for a moment I glimpsed the real Delilah underneath all that suburban polish. "That Lake Reserve property should belong to this community, not some outsider who doesn't understand our values. We'll see what the courts have to say about your fraudulent purchase." I remembered something my old foreman used to say about dealing with property disputes. Public auction sales with clear title trump everything. Deed restrictions, HOA claims, community standards, the whole works. If you buy it legally at auction, it's yours, period. I'd learned the hard way to always verify any inspector's credentials through official channels after a scammer nearly convinced my neighbor to pay for emergency electrical upgrades that would have burned his house down. That night, I called a real estate attorney to double-check my purchase. Turns out my deed was solid as bedrock. Not only was the auction completely legal, but the previous owners had retained something called territorial water extraction privileges that nobody had bothered to explain during the sale. The lawyer's exact words, "Mr. Thornton, you didn't just buy lakefront property. You bought something far more valuable than you realize. I'd strongly suggest you research exactly what those territorial water rights mean." Standing on my dock that evening, listening to the gentle slap of water against cedar posts and breathing in that clean mountain air mixed with the distant aroma of someone's barbecue, I started to understand that Uncle Jasper hadn't just left me a cabin and some land. He'd left me ammunition for a war I didn't even know was coming. The certified letter arrived 2 days after the fake inspector incident, thick and official-looking with urgent legal notice, stamped in red across the envelope. The smell of fresh ink and legal intimidation filled my kitchen as I tore it open. "Emergency HOA meeting protecting community water access," the headline screamed. Delilah was organizing what she called an emergency session to discuss threats to our exclusive lake privileges and legal action against fraudulent property claims. The meeting agenda was a masterpiece of manipulation. She planned to convince all 47 homeowners to pool money for a lawsuit forcing me to sell my lake reserve back to the community. Her letter claimed my purchase was legally questionable and threatened everyone's property values and water rights. Water rights. There was that phrase again. I was still puzzling over the letter when a beat-up Chevy truck pulled into my driveway. Out stepped a guy about 38, wearing work boots and carrying surveying equipment with the easy confidence of someone who actually knew his trade. "You must be Rex," he called out. "I'm Garrett Flynn, local surveyor and part-time fishing guide. Heard Delilah's declaring war on your water access. News travels fast around here." "Small community," Garrett said, walking over with his hand extended. "Plus, I got one of those same legal threat letters. I'm the only other non-HOA resident with independent lake access. Live in that converted boathouse downstream. Delilah's been trying to run me off for 3 years." The bacon smell drifting from the expensive houses made my stomach growl, reminding me I'd been living on coffee and whatever canned goods Uncle Jasper had left behind. What's her deal with us regular folks? Control and money. She makes fortunes selling exclusive lake access to rich people. Having us commoners around ruins her luxury narrative. Garrett studied my property with professional interest. "But Rex, I gotta ask, your deed mentions territorial water extraction privileges. You research what that actually means? Honestly, legal paperwork might as well be hieroglyphics." Garrett's eyes lit up. "Mind if I take a look? I specialize in historical property research, and something about Delilah's panic over your water rights doesn't add up." 20 minutes later, we were spread across my kitchen table with deed paperwork, survey maps, and Garrett's laptop displaying Montana territorial statutes. The cabin filled with the musty smell of old documents and fresh possibilities. "Holy hell," Garrett whispered, then caught himself. "Sorry, but Rex, you need to understand what you actually bought here. A headache and a lawsuit? You bought control of the entire lake water system." He pointed at faded blue lines on an 1887 survey map. "These markings show underground springs feeding Pine Lake. Every drop of water in this lake flows from sources on your property." My coffee cup nearly slipped from suddenly numb fingers. "Come again?" "Territorial water extraction privileges from 1887, Garrett explained, pulling up legal statutes on his screen. "Montana territorial law gives you authority over underground water sources. Pine Lake Estates was built in the 1990s, but check this out." He scrolled through county records. The developers never secured water rights before construction. I stared at the survey map where thin blue lines traced from my springs to the entire lake system. My brain was struggling to process the implications. "Every one of those million-dollar homes," Garrett continued, "gets their exclusive lake access from water flowing through your land. Legally, you control their entire supply." That's when Delilah's real panic made sense. She wasn't just worried about my dock or property values. She was terrified because I'd accidentally bought the foundation of her entire business model. "The original developers assumed lake water was public," Garrett said, "but territorial rights trump everything: zoning, HOA rules, modern permits. I learned this the hard way when researching historical mining claims. Western territorial governments granted water rights in perpetuity, and they transfer automatically with property deeds. Most people never bother checking what historical rights come with old properties." Just then, my phone rang. Delilah's voice was shrill with barely controlled hysteria. "Mr. Thornton, I'm calling to offer a generous settlement. The community is prepared to purchase your property for $200,000, $50,000 above what you paid. This would solve everyone's problems." I looked at Garrett, who was grinning and shaking his head. "Delilah, I appreciate the offer, but I think I'll hold on to my investment for now." "You don't understand the legal complexities involved," she snapped. "That property should never have been sold separately from community water access. Maybe you should have thought about that before your fake inspector tried to intimidate me off my own land." The line went dead. Garrett was practically bouncing with excitement. Rex, she just confirmed everything. Delilah knows exactly what you own, and she's scared shitless about it. Delilah's next move came under cover of darkness, and it was personal. I woke up Monday morning to find my dock rope lines cut clean through, the severed ends floating in the water like dead snakes. Tuesday brought loosened support posts that creaked ominously when I stepped on them. Wednesday, someone had spray-painted "Trespasser" across the cedar planks in sloppy red letters that smelled like cheap hardware store paint. The message was clear: get out or things get worse. Professional job, Garrett observed, examining the damage Thursday morning. The scent of cut rope and wood stain filled the air, mixing with his strong black coffee that could probably dissolve paint. Whoever's doing this knows exactly how to make a dock unsafe without making it collapse completely. Trying to force me off the water without creating evidence of serious vandalism? Smart money says yes, but also stupid money because we're going to catch them red-handed. Garrett arrived that afternoon with equipment that looked like it belonged on a nature documentary. Professional trail cameras with infrared capability, motion sensors, and audio recording that could pick up a whispered conversation from 50 yards away. Time to turn your property into Fort Knox, he announced, unpacking waterproof housings and wireless transmitters. These babies will catch a mouse scratching its ass at midnight. We spent the day positioning cameras in hidden locations around my dock and the access paths, disguising them in fake tree bark and weatherproof cases. The work was oddly satisfying, like setting a trap for something that had been stealing from your chicken coop. That night, I got my first real look at Pine Lake's after-dark entertainment. The cameras captured everything in crystal-clear detail. A figure in dark clothing moving across my property at 2:30 a.m. with the confidence of someone who'd done this before. Wire cutters, spray paint, and what looked like a small crowbar. A complete vandalism toolkit. But the real jackpot was when the figure's phone rang. "Yeah, Mom, I'm almost done with the dock. No, nobody's around. The red paint like you wanted?" "What do you mean, send a stronger message?" $2,000? You promised me $2,000 for this security work. Bradley Whitmore, Delilah's 19-year-old son, clear as day on both video and audio, taking orders from Mommy Dearest while destroying my property with stolen HOA money. The next morning, I found Bradley at Pine Lake's only coffee shop, nervously fidgeting with his phone and surrounded by the smell of burnt espresso and teenage anxiety. His hands shook slightly when I slid into the booth across from him, and his acne-scarred face flushed red under the harsh fluorescent lights. "Morning, Bradley? Rough night?" "I don't know what you mean," he mumbled, not making eye contact. I pulled out my phone and played 10 seconds of audio from the previous evening. Bradley's own voice filled the small coffee shop. "Yeah, Mom, I'm almost done with the dock." The kid's composure shattered like thin ice under a boot. "Oh shit, oh shit, oh shit." "Here's what I know," I said quietly, keeping my voice conversational while morning regulars chatted around us. "Your mom's been paying you to vandalize my property using money stolen from the HOA emergency fund. That's not just vandalism, that's felony embezzlement." Bradley started hyperventilating. "She said it was security work. She said you were dangerous and threatening the community. I didn't know it was stealing." The floodgates opened, and Bradley revealed something I hadn't expected. This wasn't Delilah's first rodeo. She'd run identical harassment campaigns against 3 other homeowners who'd challenged her authority over the past 5 years. Each family received escalating violations, mysterious property damage, and social isolation until they sold their homes below market value just to escape. The kicker? Delilah's real estate company had handled every one of those distressed sales, earning her fat commissions while eliminating opposition to her reign of terror. "She calls it community improvement," Bradley whispered, tears mixing with the steam from his untouched coffee. "Says some people just don't fit the Pine Lake lifestyle and need encouragement to find somewhere more suitable." I'd learned about HOA fund misuse during my electrician days when a contractor tried to overcharge a community I was wiring. Using association money for personal vendettas was criminal embezzlement, pure and simple. Every HOA member had the legal right to demand detailed audits and documentation of expenditures, especially when emergency funds mysteriously disappeared. "Bradley, your mother's been running a protection racket disguised as community management, and you just handed me everything I need to prove it." The kid broke down completely, sobbing into his hands while the morning coffee crowd pretended not to notice. I almost felt sorry for him, almost. But then I remembered the taste of anger mixed with paint fumes when I'd seen "Trespasser" sprayed across Uncle Jasper's hand-built dock. That afternoon, I met with Garrett to plan our strategy. We had ironclad evidence of vandalism, embezzlement, and systematic harassment. But most importantly, We had those territorial water rights sitting in my back pocket like a nuclear option. Delilah Whitmore was about to learn what happened when you picked a fight with someone who owned the water you were floating on. That weekend, I finally decided to tackle Uncle Jasper's basement. I'd been avoiding it, partly because the place reeked of 40 years of pipe tobacco and something that might have been ancient fish bait, but mostly because rifling through a dead man's obsessions felt like grave robbing. The basement was a monument to obsessive record-keeping. Metal filing cabinets lined one wall, each drawer labeled in Jasper's meticulous handwriting, property surveys 1980 to 2010, water rights documentation, legal correspondence, and ominously, HOA disputes 1,995 to 2,015 inches. My hands were actually trembling when I opened the water rights cabinet. Survey reports dating back to 1887, legal correspondence with territorial land offices, court documents from disputes that had apparently raged for decades, and maps. Dozens of incredibly detailed maps showing underground water systems that looked like the nervous system of some massive subterranean beast. But the document that stopped my heart was a carbon copy of a letter from 1994, written in Uncle Jasper's careful script. Margaret, those developers never filed for territorial water rights before building. My 1887 grant still controls every spring feeding Pine Lake. Don't mind sharing. Always believed neighbors should help neighbors. But someone ought to know what the law says before trouble comes calling. The lake's been good to me. Figure I can be good to it. Jasper. The musty smell of old paper mixed with my own cold sweat as the implications hit me like a sledgehammer. I found Margaret Sawyer's business card paper-clipped to the letter and dialed with shaking fingers, praying she was still alive after 30 years. "Chen Surveying," answered a voice weathered by decades of Montana property wars. "Miss Sawyer, this is Rex Thornton. I inherited Jasper Thornton's place on Pine Lake." A sharp intake of breath. Jesus Christ. Jasper finally passed? That magnificent bastard outlived half the county. Her voice turned serious. "What can I do for you, son? I need to understand what I actually inherited." "Rex, you inherited absolute power over Pine Lake. Jasper controlled every underground spring, every water source, every drop that feeds that entire lake system. Those million-dollar houses, built without water rights, but Jasper was too decent to crush them. The basement walls seemed to close in as the full weight of this revelation settled on my shoulders like a lead blanket. What does that mean in practical terms? It means you own their water, all of it. Montana territorial law gives you complete authority over extraction, distribution, access, everything. You could shut off their entire water supply tomorrow and it would be perfectly legal. I spread Uncle Jasper's survey maps across his workbench, my fingers tracing the intricate blue lines connecting my modest property to every expensive house surrounding the lake. The sound of my own heartbeat seemed to echo in the cramped space. "Margaret, what would this be worth if I actually enforce these rights? Conservatively? 47 homes using your water illegally for 30 years? We're talking 3 to 4 million in unpaid usage fees. Current private water access rates run $800 to $1,000 per home monthly." The numbers hit me like electrical current, painful and illuminating simultaneously. Uncle Jasper had lived here for 4 decades, watching developers build a luxury community on water they'd never owned, watching real estate agents sell exclusive lake access that was legally his to control. He could have destroyed them all with a single lawsuit. Instead, he'd chosen generosity over greed, community over conflict. But Delilah Whitmore had just picked a fight with the wrong neighbor's nephew, standing in that tobacco-scented basement, surrounded by 40 years of documented restraint. I realized this wasn't about my dock anymore. I was holding the nuclear codes to Pine Lake's entire existence. The only question was whether I had the backbone to use them. Monday morning, I walked into Maya Blackstone's law office, carrying Uncle Jasper's water rights documentation like I was handling plutonium. The place smelled like leather-bound law books and the kind of expensive coffee that costs more per cup than most people spend on lunch. "Mr. Thornton," Maya said, after reviewing my documents for 20 minutes, her reading glasses perched on a nose that had obviously broken a few legal precedents. "In 30 years of water law practice, I've never seen territorial rights this comprehensive. You don't just own lake access. You control the entire hydrological foundation of their community." Maya was the kind of lawyer who could explain quantum physics to a golden retriever, probably because she'd grown up on a cattle ranch before law school taught her to weaponize words. Her steel gray hair was pulled back in a bun that meant business, and her handshake could crack granite. What are my realistic options here? Option 1, nuclear. Demand immediate payment of $3.4 million in back usage fees plus compounded interest. Legally airtight, financially apocalyptic for them. The coffee turned bitter in my mouth. That seems like overkill. Option 2, generous dictator, waive past fees, implement reasonable monthly rates, establish community conservation fund. You look magnanimous while maintaining control. And option 3? Maya's smile could have lit up the county courthouse. Psychological warfare. Offer them a choice between cooperation and complete water shutoff. Sometimes the threat of nuclear war prevents actual nuclear war, especially when you hold all the uranium. That afternoon we assembled what Maya called the Dream Team. Her partner specialized in environmental law and territorial statutes. A hydraulic engineer confirmed my complete control over Pine Lake's water system. A private investigator documented Delilah's fraud pattern across 3 states. Even a media consultant joined us to prepare for inevitable public attention. The beauty of your position, Maya explained while organizing legal briefs that smelled like fresh ink and impending justice, is that every hostile move Delilah made actually strengthened your case. Harassment, vandalism, embezzlement. She's been digging her own grave with a sterling silver shovel. But Maya's real genius was strategic patience. We're going to let her hang herself completely before we act. Tomorrow we file formal water rights notices with the county. Every homeowner gets certified mail demanding $847 monthly for water access, effective immediately. I remembered something my electrical mentor taught me about troubleshooting dangerous systems. Always give people multiple ways to solve the problem before you cut the power completely. Pride makes folks do stupid things, but offering dignity alongside consequences usually gets better cooperation than just crushing them. They'll panic, Maya continued, clearly enjoying this chess game. Emergency HOA meetings, lawyers threatening frivolous lawsuits, probably attempts to bribe local officials. That's when we reveal our generous alternative, which is complete amnesty for past usage, sliding scale fees based on property values, and establishment of the Clara Thornton Memorial Conservation Fund using water rights income. You transform from potential destroyer to reluctant community savior. That evening, Garrett brought 3 sympathetic neighbors to a secret meeting in my kitchen. The smell of fresh coffee mixed with nervous energy as we discussed what Maya called community coalition building. Delilah's terrorized this neighborhood for years, whispered Janet Morrison, whose waterfront cottage had been targeted with similar harassment campaigns. But nobody dared speak up because she controls the HOA budget and has connections with local contractors. She tried to force us out 2 years ago, added Tom Brennan, an older gentleman whose hands shook slightly from what looked like Parkinson's. Claimed our fishing boat violated aesthetic standards and threatened daily fines until we removed it. These weren't just victims. They were potential allies who understood exactly what Delilah represented. We spent 2 hours documenting her pattern of abuse, building a comprehensive case that went far beyond my property dispute. The key, Maya had explained earlier, is framing this as community liberation, not personal revenge. You want history to remember you as the guy who freed Pine Lake from a tyrant, not the guy who held their water hostage. Late that night, Garrett and I installed professional flow monitoring equipment on my springs. The water bubbled up from underground caverns with a sound like the Earth's own heartbeat, crystal clear streams that had been flowing since before Montana achieved statehood. You realize the responsibility here? Garrett asked, adjusting sensors that would document every gallon flowing to the luxury houses. This isn't just about legal authority. You're now the environmental guardian of an irreplaceable ecosystem. The weight of Uncle Jasper's legacy settled on my shoulders like a well-fitted backpack. He hadn't just left me property rights, he'd made me the steward of something that belonged to future generations. Standing knee-deep in spring water that tasted like liquid starlight, listening to the night sounds of a lake that legally belonged to me, I finally understood what Uncle Jasper had been protecting all these years. Tomorrow, we'd launch the legal equivalent of shock and awe. But tonight, I was just a guy with a sacred trust, planning to honor it exactly the way Clara would have wanted. The certified letters hit Pine Lake Estates like a tactical nuclear strike on Tuesday morning. By noon, my phone was ringing off the hook, and by evening, Delilah Whitmore had officially lost her damn mind. The first sign came at 6 p.m. when she showed up at my door carrying a manila envelope that smelled like desperation and expensive hand lotion. Her usually perfect hair looked like she'd been running her fingers through it for hours. and her designer clothes couldn't hide the manic energy radiating from her like heat off hot asphalt. "Mr. Thornton," she said, her voice artificially sweet with undertones that could strip paint. "I think there's been a terrible misunderstanding about these water rights claims. The community has authorized me to offer you a very generous settlement." She opened the envelope with theatrical flair, revealing stacks of $100 bills that rustled like autumn leaves. $75,000 cash for you to voluntarily relocate. Think of it as a fresh start somewhere more suitable for your needs. I was recording the entire conversation on my phone, which Maya had suggested after Delilah's previous bribery attempt. The woman was practically gift-wrapping federal charges for the FBI. "That's quite an offer, Delilah. Where exactly would this money come from?" "The HOA emergency fund, of course. We're prepared to make sacrifices for community harmony." "You mean the same emergency fund you've been stealing from to pay your son for vandalism?" Her mask slipped for just a second, revealing something genuinely dangerous underneath all that suburban polish. "I have no idea what you're talking about. Bradley does legitimate security work for the community. Spray painting trespasser on my dock is security work?" That's when she went full psycho. "You have no right to those water claims. That lake belongs to this community. We built our lives here, our dreams, our futures. Some outsider can't just show up and steal everything we've worked for." What I didn't expect was her next move. The following morning, I discovered she'd filed false police reports claiming I'd threatened her with violence during our recorded conversation. 3 different complaints: assault, stalking, and terroristic threats against the community. Deputy Rodriguez showed up at my door looking like he'd rather be anywhere else. "Mr. Thornton, I have to ask you some questions about alleged threats made against Delilah Whitmore and several community members." "Deputy, I've got video recording of every interaction I've had with that woman. Would you like to see what actually happened?" His relief was visible. "That would be extremely helpful, sir." 20 minutes later, after watching Delilah's bribery attempt and unhinged rant, Deputy Rodriguez was shaking his head. "Mr. Thornton, this woman has filed 17 false reports in the past 2 years. We're building a pattern of abuse case against her. But Delilah's desperation campaign was just getting started. That afternoon, anonymous flyers appeared on every windshield in Pine Lake estates. Dangerous individual threatens community water supply. Protect your families. The flyers included a grainy photo of me taken with a telephoto lens, making me look like some kind of wanted fugitive. The text claimed I was mentally unstable following wife's death and obsessed with revenge fantasies against successful neighbors. Maya's private investigator was documenting everything, building what she called a federal case that would make prosecutors weep with joy. The smell of Delilah's panic was stronger than the pine air fresheners hanging from expensive SUVs parked around the lake. By Thursday, the harassment escalated to coordinated intimidation. Cars would drive past my property every hour, honking horns and shouting insults. Someone had organized a telephone harassment campaign. My phone rang constantly with blocked numbers and heavy breathing. The breaking point came Friday evening when I found my truck's tires slashed and "water thief" keyed into the paint. But this time, Delilah had made a crucial mistake. The security cameras Garrett had installed caught everything, including her Mercedes parked on the access road while the vandalism occurred. Maya's investigation had uncovered the real reason for Delilah's desperation. The woman was drowning in debt from failed real estate investments and online gambling addiction. She owed over $200,000 to various creditors, and the only thing keeping her afloat was skimming from HOA funds. "She needs you gone," Maya explained, "not just because you threaten her authority, but because you're about to expose embezzlement that could send her to federal prison. Desperate people do increasingly stupid things when cornered." That weekend, I received the most disturbing escalation yet. A certified letter from a Seattle law firm threatening a $2 million lawsuit for intentional infliction of emotional distress and economic terrorism against community values. The legal letter was laughably overwritten, claiming my mere presence and malicious water rights claims were causing irreparable psychological trauma to families and children. They demanded I immediately cease all harassment activities and sign a non-disclosure agreement about community issues. But the truly desperate move came Sunday night. I woke to the sound of someone trying to break into my basement, specifically targeting Uncle Jasper's filing cabinets where the original water rights documents were stored. This time, I didn't just watch and record. I grabbed my baseball bat and my brightest flashlight and caught Delilah herself red-handed, crowbar in hand, trying to pry open the cabinet containing territorial survey maps. The look on her face when my flashlight beam hit her was pure trapped animal, cornered, dangerous, and completely past rational thought. "Hello, Delilah," I said calmly. "Looking for something specific?" Monday morning brought Delilah's final desperate gambit, delivered via hand-printed flyer slipped under every door in Pine Lake Estates. The paper smelled like cheap copier toner and mounting hysteria. "Emergency community meeting, tonight 7 p.m., Pine Lake Clubhouse," the headline screamed in Comic Sans font that somehow made everything more unhinged. "Resolving property disputes for community harmony and child safety. Media invited to witness David versus Goliath story." Maya read the flyer over my shoulder while sipping coffee that could probably dissolve concrete. "She's walking straight into our trap. Could not have planned this better if we'd written the script ourselves." The meeting agenda was a masterpiece of manipulation. Delilah planned to present what she called documented evidence of harassment and intimidation, followed by community testimony about threats to family safety. The climax would be her demand for a restraining order and immediate resolution of fraudulent water rights claims. "She's expecting you to lose your temper under public pressure," Maya explained, organizing our counterattack materials. "Probably planning to record your unhinged outburst for future court proceedings." What Delilah didn't know was that we'd spent the weekend preparing our own surprise presentation. That morning, Maya filed formal water rights enforcement notices with the county recorder, making everything official and legally bulletproof. By noon, certified letters were hitting every mailbox in Pine Lake Estates, demanding $847 monthly for water access starting immediately, with a 30-day deadline for compliance. The timing was surgical. Homeowners would receive the notices just hours before the meeting, ensuring maximum emotional impact when Delilah tried to paint me as the aggressor. "Beautiful psychological warfare," Maya murmured, watching expensive cars speed past my property as panicked residents raced to emergency phone consultations with their lawyers. At 4 p.m., Channel 7 News arrived expecting a simple neighbor dispute story. Reporter Patricia Vance was known for her investigative work on municipal corruption, and her camera crew set up equipment with the efficiency of people who'd covered actual news, not suburban drama. "Miss Vance," I said quietly during their setup, "you might want to research Montana territorial water law before tonight's meeting. This story is bigger than anyone realizes." I handed her a manila folder containing copies of Uncle Jasper's documents, financial evidence of Delilah's embezzlement, and timeline documentation of the harassment campaign. Her eyes widened as she flipped through pages that told a story of fraud, intimidation, and systematic abuse spanning multiple states. "Mr. Thornton," she said slowly, "this isn't a property dispute. This is organized crime disguised as community management." By 6:30 p.m., the Pine Lake Clubhouse was packed beyond capacity. The smell of tension mixed with fresh coffee and the kind of expensive perfume that costs more than most people's rent. 43 of 47 homeowners had shown up, along with media crew, and an atmosphere you could cut with a dull knife. Delilah positioned herself at the head table like a general preparing for battle, surrounded by poster boards covered with photos of my property and what looked like a PowerPoint presentation titled "Protecting Our Community Values." Maya sat in the back row disguised as a concerned neighbor, her briefcase full of legal documentation positioned for quick access. Garrett stationed himself near the technical equipment with backup recording devices and our own visual aids. I took a seat in the middle section, carrying Uncle Jasper's original 1887 territorial deed in a leather portfolio that had belonged to my grandfather. The portfolio felt warm in my hands, like it was somehow alive with the weight of history. 10 minutes before the meeting started, Patricia Vance approached me with information that changed everything. Her background research had uncovered something even Maya hadn't discovered. Delilah was already under federal investigation for HOA fraud in Oregon and Idaho. The FBI had been building a multi-state case against her for over a year. "Mr. Thornton," Patricia whispered, "federal agents are literally waiting for enough evidence to arrest her. Tonight might be exactly what they need." The psychological atmosphere was electric. Delilah sat at her table organizing attack materials with supreme confidence, completely unaware that she was about to detonate a nuclear bomb in her own face. Residents filed in with mixtures of curiosity, dread, and the kind of anticipation that comes right before someone's world gets turned upside down. Maya confirmed via text that all legal documents were properly filed and immediately enforceable. The water rights claims were now official county records, backed by 137 years of territorial law and bulletproof legal precedent. At exactly 7 p.m., Delilah called the meeting to order with theatrical authority. Ladies and gentlemen, we're here tonight because our community is under attack by forces that threaten everything we've built together. The camera lights created harsh shadows across her face as she began what would be the last public speech of her HOA career. In her briefcase sat evidence of my supposed harassment. In my portfolio sat legal documents that would destroy her completely. The taste of inevitable victory was as sweet as the mountain air drifting through the clubhouse windows. Delilah opened her presentation like a prosecutor delivering closing arguments in a murder trial, her voice dripping with practiced emotion and suburban righteousness. "Ladies and gentlemen," she announced to the packed clubhouse, adjusting her microphone with theatrical precision, "we're gathered tonight because our peaceful community is under siege. For months, we've endured systematic harassment, property destruction, and now," she paused for dramatic effect, "extortion attempts disguised as legal water rights claims." The camera lights made everything look harsh and unforgiving as she clicked to her first PowerPoint slide, a blown-up photo of my modest cabin with "Threat to Community Values" written in red letters underneath. "This individual," she continued, pointing at me like I was evidence in a criminal trial, "has threatened our families, vandalized community property, and now claims to own water that has belonged to Pine Lake Estates for 30 years. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Several neighbors turned to stare at me with expressions ranging from curiosity to outright hostility. Delilah called her first witness, Jennifer Walsh, who lived 3 houses down from the lake. "Tell everyone about your encounter with Mr. Thornton last Tuesday." Jennifer stood nervously, clearly rehearsed. "He approached my children while they were playing by the water and told them they were trespassing. My 8-year-old daughter came home crying, saying the scary man claimed he owned the lake. Complete fabrication. I'd been in town getting supplies last Tuesday and had never spoken to the woman's children, but several residents nodded sympathetically, and I could see the narrative taking hold. 2 more witnesses followed with equally creative stories about my supposed intimidation tactics, property damage threats, and unstable behavior following my wife's death. Each testimony felt like a coordinated attack designed to paint me as a dangerous outsider threatening their perfect community. "And now," Delilah concluded with righteous fury, "he's demanding nearly $1,000 monthly from each family for water access we've had legally for decades. This is extortion, pure and simple." Scattered applause filled the room. Several residents were nodding agreement, and I could feel public opinion solidifying against me. Delilah's performance was masterful. If you didn't know she was completely full of shit. That's when I stood up. The room went silent except for the hum of camera equipment and the distant sound of water lapping against the shoreline outside. I walked slowly to the microphone, carrying Uncle Jasper's leather portfolio like it contained the crown jewels. "Thank you for letting me respond to these interesting stories," I said, my voice calm and measured despite my racing heartbeat. "But before we talk about harassment or extortion, I think everyone should understand exactly what's at stake here." I opened the portfolio and removed the original 1887 territorial deed, its yellowed pages crackling slightly in the microphone. "This document was filed with the Montana Territory Land Office 137 years ago. It grants my property exclusive rights to all underground water sources feeding Pine Lake." A few confused murmurs, but most people looked lost. "Let me put this in simpler terms," I continued, pulling out Garrett's survey maps and projecting them on the screen. "Every drop of water in this lake, every drop that makes your lakefront properties valuable, flows from springs located on land I legally purchased 3 months ago. Now I had their attention. You could have heard a pine needle drop. Pine Lake Estates was built in the 1990s without securing water rights from the Territorial Land Grant. For 30 years, you've been using water that legally belongs to my property, and nobody bothered to get permission." Maya joined me at the microphone with her briefcase full of documentation. "Ladies and gentlemen, I'm Maya Blackstone, Mr. Thornton's attorney. What he's telling you is absolutely correct. Montana territorial water law predates all modern zoning, all HOA regulations, and all development permits." Patricia Vance's camera captured every shocked face in the crowd as Maya continued. "Mr. Thornton could legally shut off your water supply tomorrow, the certified letters you received today demanding monthly fees, completely within his legal rights. But we weren't finished." Maya opened her briefcase and pulled out financial documents. "However, what you should really know is how your HOA president has been stealing your money while lying about these water rights." The audio recording of Delilah's bribery attempt filled the clubhouse through the speaker system. Her own voice echoed off the walls. $75,000 cash for you to voluntarily relocate. Then came the video footage of Bradley's vandalism, crystal clear on the projection screen. Delilah's son with wire cutters and spray paint, followed by his phone conversation. "Yeah, Mom, I'm finishing the dock like you said." She screamed like a wounded animal, lunging toward the microphone. "Those are lies, fabricated evidence. This man is destroying our community with 19th century technicalities." But the crowd had turned. Neighbors who'd applauded her minutes earlier were now staring at her with disgust and disbelief. Calls for her immediate resignation echoed through the room. Deputy Rodriguez, who'd been watching from the back, stepped forward with handcuffs. "Ma'am, you're under arrest for embezzlement and filing false police reports." As Delilah was led away in handcuffs, still screaming about unfair laws and community destruction, I stepped back to the microphone for my final statement. I came to Pine Lake seeking peace after my wife's death. I just wanted to fix my dock and fish in quiet waters. But when you try to steal from a widowed electrician who knows his property rights... I paused, looking directly into Patricia Vance's camera. "Maybe you should check who actually owns the water you're floating on first." The silence that followed Delilah's arrest was broken only by the sound of handcuffs clicking and her muffled protests from the back of Deputy Rodriguez's patrol car. The clubhouse smelled like tension, spilled coffee, and the beginning of something entirely new. 43 neighbors sat processing the fact that their community dictator was heading to federal prison, while the guy they'd been ready to lynch actually owned the water keeping their million-dollar dreams afloat. Patricia Vance's live broadcast went viral within hours. Water Rights Warrior was trending nationwide, and my phone buzzed constantly with interview requests from news outlets who couldn't believe a widowed electrician had just dismantled an entire corruption network with century-old legal documents. But the real magic started the next morning. Jennifer Walsh was first to knock on my door, her 8-year-old daughter clutching a plate of chocolate chip cookies that smelled like genuine remorse. The woman who'd lied about me threatening her children now looked ready to crawl into the lake and disappear. "Mr. Thornton," she whispered, "I'm so sorry. Delilah told us you were dangerous, that you'd destroy our property values. She said if we didn't stick together against you, we'd all lose everything we'd worked for." Over the following weeks, similar apologies arrived daily. Neighbors brought homemade meals, offered to repair vandalism damage, and shared their own stories of Delilah's reign of terror. The community that had been frozen in fear was finally breathing freely again. Maya's legal strategy worked like clockwork. Pine Lake Estates HOA voluntarily dissolved and reformed with transparent leadership, term limits, and mandatory financial audits. Their first unanimous vote was accepting my generous water rights settlement, proof that reasonable people can solve problems when bullies aren't pulling the strings. I waived all $3.4 million in back fees. Instead, we established sliding-scale monthly rates from $200 for modest homes to $600 for waterfront mansions. Every dollar flows into the Clara Thornton Memorial Conservation Fund, which protects the lake's ecosystem permanently while funding college scholarships for local students who demonstrate environmental stewardship. Delilah's federal investigation revealed crimes spanning 5 years across 4 states. $300,000 embezzled from multiple HOAs, systematic harassment campaigns, wire fraud, mail fraud, and gambling debts that could have bought a small aircraft. She received 24 months in federal prison plus full restitution, with her real estate license permanently revoked in 6 states. The sweetest irony? Bradley, the kid who vandalized my dock, became our most dedicated conservation volunteer after accepting a community service deal. Now he teaches disadvantaged children how to fish from the public access area I donated, turning his destructive energy into something that would make Uncle Jasper proud. 1 year later, Pine Lake hosts an annual conservation festival that draws families from across the region. The smell of barbecue smoke mixes with pine-scented air while children splash in water that's cleaner now than it's been in decades. Local vendors sell fishing gear and environmental education materials, creating economic benefits that ripple through the entire community. Maya's law practice became the national go-to resource for HOA abuse victims. Her best-selling book, Know Your Rights, A Homeowner's Defense Against Community Tyranny, sits on coffee tables across America, and 3 law schools now require my case as study material for property rights courses. Garrett married Patricia Vance in a lakeside ceremony that made regional newspapers. Their reception held on my donated public land with fish caught from community waters and live music floating across the lake from our permanent stage. Every morning, I still drink coffee on Uncle Jasper's hand-built dock, watching mist rise off water that legally belongs to me but spiritually belongs to everyone who respects it. The taste of mountain air mixed with genuine community satisfaction reminds me that Clara was right. The best way to honor someone's memory is by making sure others don't suffer the same injustice. The Scholarship Fund has sponsored 15 students through college, including Jennifer's daughter, who wants to study environmental law and help protect lakes like Mr. Rex does. That girl's smile when she got her acceptance letter was worth more than any water rights settlement. Standing on my dock at sunset, listening to children's laughter echo across water where expensive boats once roared with entitlement, I finally understand Uncle Jasper's greatest lesson. Real power isn't about controlling people. It's about setting them free to be their best selves. Drop your worst HOA horror story in the comments below. I read every single one, and Maya's firm might be able to help you fight back. Hit that subscribe button on HOA Stories if you love seeing neighborhood bullies get exactly what they deserve, because next week we're diving into the parking ticket that exposed a $3 million municipal corruption scheme that'll make this water rights battle look like small change.
That's a wrap for today's episode on HOA Stories. If you enjoyed watching karma in action, smash that like button, comment your thoughts, and let us know if you've dealt with HOA madness too. Subscribe so you won't miss the next HOA meltdown we post.